Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Demand a Homestead. My name is Amanda, and today what we're going to be talking about is how to know whether you are using your wood stove at the right temperature. Are you burning either too low or are you burning too hot? Okay, and the reason why that matters to start off with is if you are burning too low, for example, then you're more likely to not be getting what we call a complete burn, where all the kind of wood burns up completely and you don't get as much ash and buildup, which they call creosote. And the reason why that matters is that creosote can actually accumulate in your stove pipe, and as it does, it actually can become a fire hazard. And that's where people can actually get chimney fires, which is a super bad thing, okay? So you definitely don't want to burn your stove too low, because then you're at risk of getting creosote buildup, which can lead to a chimney fire. Now, it's also important to make sure that you are getting your wood stove cleaned every so often, so that the chimney cleaned, and they can tell you whether you're getting creosote buildup. That will be another good way of telling whether you're burning at the right temperature, okay? The other thing that's important is that you don't burn your stove too hot, because that can damage your stove, all right? Now, I've heard people say, you know, you'll burn your house down and all that stuff. With the stoves today, that's not as likely that that's going to happen, but what is more likely is that you're actually going to damage some of the internal parts of the stove, like the baffles up at the top there. Those can wear out, you can crack your fire bricks, things like that, right? Those are the things that are more likely to happen. Of course, there is still a risk that, you know, if you have an older stove or if you're really aggressively burning, yeah, I guess you could conceivably melt the stove and set the house on fire. That would be super bad, okay? Unlikely, but super bad. So the question then becomes, how can I tell whether I'm burning my stove at the right temperature? So there's a few different ways. One, you know, which is what I was kind of using for most of the time while I was using a wood stove, is just kind of telling by the look of the flames here, okay? So let me kind of flip you around so you can see the, or flip the phone around so that you can see the stove and the fire a bit better. Okay, so here is my wood stove. Getting nice and close so we can see that beautiful fire. All right, that's burning reasonably hot, I would say. And I've got my air intake, which you totally cannot see. I've got my air intake probably about 3/4 open. All right, if I turn it more open, this might take a minute, where you can see that you'll start getting way more flames. Kind of hard to tell, but if I left that for a while there would be way more flames and it would get really hot in there, okay? And then potentially be too hot. Now, if I close that air intake completely, you'll see the difference in the color of the flames. All right? So watch what happens. Now, this stove won't shut down air completely because it's just not designed to do that, but you can watch the color of the flames. See those bright yellow flames up at the top there? Those are really hot flames. And the ones that are kind of lower down, that are more of a darker red, those are cooler flames, okay? So this would be all right as far as temperature for burning, but if it got kind of darker than this or fewer flames, then I would be worried about creosote buildup. And you can kind of see how it's getting a little bit darker yet. But I'm not going to leave it like that because I don't want it to burn like that, okay? Because that's where we could potentially get some creosote buildup. So I'm going to open that air intake back up to where it was. And that fire should come back to where we want it to be. So another way to kind of get a more objective measurement of how hot your stove is to actually use a thermometer, okay? And they have lots of different thermometers which are built for wood stoves. The trick is to know which kind you need to get or want to get. And the first thing you need to know before you decide which thermometer to get is whether you have a single or a double walled stovepipe, okay? So, which is very much the way it sounds. Is it one layer or is it two layers? Now, if your stove is close to a corner or a wall like mine is, you're much more likely to have a double-walled stovepipe, okay? Because it just allows you to have that closer to the side of the house, prevents kind of that getting too hot and being a fire risk. So that is important to know before you go and get a thermometer, whether you have a single or double wall. Because most stovepipe thermometers are designed for single wall stovepipes. And so if you put one that's designed for a single wall on a double wall, it will measure the temperature much lower than it actually is. And that's the temperature of the gases that are going up the chimney, okay? So if you still want to know the temperature of the gases going up the chimney, you can get ones that are designed for a double wall. You have to kind of drill a little hole in there and you stick a probe inside, and that will allow you to kind of measure those temperatures. Now, I didn't particularly want to do that, so we got something else, which is called a stovetop thermometer, which I'm going to try and show you. Okay, so here is my stovetop thermometer, and as it kind of would make sense, it sits right on top of the stove, okay? And it reads the temperature. Now, of course, different parts of the stovetop will be different temperatures, so you kind of, ideally you place it where you think the stove would be hottest, where the flames are going to be hottest, and that will give you the best idea. And it measures in Fahrenheit, and then it will tell you kind of what is the temperature where you're likely to get creosote, which is from 100 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where you're burning too low. And then your kind of your best zone is from 400 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And then where you're over firing or you're too hot is from about 650 all the way up to 800, okay? And again, this very clearly says stove top. The trick is that if you get one that's designed for a stovepipe, the temperatures are lower, okay? Because obviously the fire in the firebox is hotter than the gases that are going up the chimney. So they're not interchangeable, all right? So you won't be able to use one in the other place, okay? So it's very important to make sure that you have the right one, all right? So these are all magnetic, and they'll just kind of magnetize to the top of your stove or to the pipe of your stove, okay? So we're gonna put that on my stove, and we can kind of see, we'll give it a few minutes to come to temperature. It was already pretty hot, which is why I've got my glove on, because I didn't want to burn myself. And then we'll see where we are with the stove right now. Okay, so we have put that thermometer back on the stovetop. It's been about at least 5 or 10 minutes. And let's check and see where we are. See if we can not get the camera attacked by the eco fan here. All right, so we come over here and we are pretty close. We get right in there. You see it, not really all that well, but it is in the best zone, probably around 540 degrees, which again is okay for the stovetop. It would not be okay if this were something you were measuring on your stovepipe. That should be colder. All right, so, but for the stovetop, that is a perfect temperature. And that's kind of what the flame looks like, okay? It's an active flame. It's yellow, but it's not filling the firebox. That's what we want. So the other part of this that I wanted to talk about, so this is kind of like the fire that you would have going during the day where you're coming in, you're feeding it logs occasionally. The other thing that I have a video on, which is how to load your wood stove for an overnight burn. I've had quite a few people comment that I've put too much wood in there and that, you know, it's going to overfire the stove. So what I wanted to do is to do this same thing, not now because it's early evening and I don't want to load up the stove just yet, but when I've got it loaded up and ready, I'm ready to go to bed and it's burning the way I want it to, I'm going to show you guys what the temperature is like, okay? And you can kind of get an idea from there about whether in fact it's too hot or whether it's just about right. Okay, so we'll see you guys in a few hours and we'll check that out too. If you want to watch that video on how to load your stove for an overnight burn, please feel free to check it out on my channel. All right, so we'll be back shortly. Bye-bye. Okay, so here is my stove, which is loaded for the overnight burn. And I apologize, it's a little bit dirty, but I've got logs in there, and we're burning kind of with the air intake as close to close as is possible on this stove. And if we go and take a look at our thermometer, best as you can see it, it's in the kind of higher, but still, whatever they say, best zone, okay? So right now it's working kind of as I want it to. It could be a little bit cooler. It will get cooler as the night goes on, but it's gonna burn down slowly like that. And in the morning, we're still gonna have hot coals. And for everybody who was kind of worried that I was gonna burn down my house, I don't think we're going to, because our wood stove top thermometer seems to suggest we're still well in that good zone. All right? So thank you very much for joining me on another episode of I Demand a Homestead. If you have any questions or comments about this video, please feel free to put them in the comment section. If you like this video, press the subscribe button, and then you'll know whenever I put out another video. And hopefully we will hear from you guys soon. All right, everybody, have a lovely evening and take care. Bye-bye.